Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to episode 4, season 2 of the British English podcast with your host, Charlie Baxter. And today's show, it's a belter, meaning it's a very good or exceptional episode for you. And I doubt I need to introduce the guest on today's episode, but in case you haven't heard of Luke from Luke's English podcast, then, well, I've kind of just done so. Yes, so Luke has been doing his podcast for many, many years. And in fact, when I was doing my teacher training course, I would listen to his show feeling inspired about perhaps doing something similar one day. And now, 6 years or so later, he's on my show. Woohoo! In this episode, we start off by getting to know the man behind the podcast. And Luke has some fantastic vocabulary, so this is rich in intermediate to advanced native expressions for you. And I reckon this first part of the show, because there are 3 parts, as it's a seasonal episode. So this first part of the show paints a nice picture for what one might see as a young person's alternative approach to a career in the UK. I'm not saying people take the exact same path as Luke, but a lot of us leave education feeling similar to how he did, and then we try to just figure things out before we find the career of our choice. But without giving any more away, please welcome the delightfully talented teacher, podcaster, and comedian, Luke Thompson from Luke's English podcast. Hello, Luke. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Hello, Charlie.
Lovely
to
have you on the show.
Lovely to be on the show.
It's been a while for me to write that email to send to you to ask you if you wanted to do a collaboration. It was quite exciting for me because it's been a long time coming, and you've been doing podcasts for how long now?
It's coming up to 12 years now. Yeah.
12 years.
So I started in April 2009, Easter 2009. So
okay.
Yeah, it's quite a long time. 2009.
I was just starting university then.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
does that make you feel old?
I already felt old. When I woke up this morning, I was like, yeah, I'm old. You know, I didn't need anyone else to tell me. Well, I've got a daughter. I've got a 3-year-old daughter. That also sort of contributes to that feeling. No, I mean, 12 years. Right, you were just starting university, and there I was, just starting my first episode of my podcast.
Yeah,
crazy.
But I can't imagine you're too much older. So you must have gotten into podcasting quite quickly after you finished education.
Yeah. Okay. So I graduated in 1999. Right. 1999. So I am old.
Oh, you look great. Don't mean to,
podcasting. It's good for the skin. So after university, I had some time sort of dossing around, trying to work out what to do with my life. You know, it's common, isn't it? And playing in bands. I've played in lots of bands and things over the years.
Wow.
And then sort of decided to become an English teacher. That's like maybe 2 years after graduating, because I felt like I needed some sort of vocation, you know, I needed professional skills, because a lot of degrees that people do, I mean, this is a long story, we can't go into my entire life story, I suppose, but a lot of degrees that people do don't arm them with all of the skills that they need to be able to do a job. A lot of degrees are not vocational degrees, right?
Agreed. I did psychology. Yeah, exactly.
But psychology is great, but it's not a vocational course in the sense that you don't get a job at the end. It's not in the same way that in medicine, if you study medicine, you are a doctor, and then here you are, there's your job, you're a doctor. Or other things like certain engineering degrees and things like that, you become a job at the end, or you get a job at the end in things like psychology. And I did like media and cultural studies, which is sort of even less specific than psychology, I think, probably in terms of its vocational applications. But anyway, it's quite common for people to leave university and sort of be like, right, now what am I going to do?
Absolutely. Yeah, all of my friends and myself, we all felt that. It took me a couple of years to figure it out, and I think trial and error is a good solution. This episode comes with a free worksheet over on the website, thebritishenglishpodcast.com. So grab that and you can listen along whilst using it. So you did the music for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I ever really thought that I was going to make it as a professional musician, but I was in bands, and it was, being in bands is great. And I was in a few bands that were kind of taking it pretty seriously, bands that were doing gigs, and we had a manager, and we were doing lots of gigs, and we were trying to trying to establish ourselves and things like that.
What was your instrument?
Drums.
Oh, really?
Yeah, drummer, yeah.
I was a fellow drummer.
Behind me. You used to be a drummer?
Yeah.
Really? Tell me more. You used to be, so you don't play anymore?
Well, I've been jumping across the continents for the last 10 years to sound pretentious, and I haven't been able to take my drum kit with me. So I haven't really practiced properly since I was at uni. But around 16, that was my peak, I'd say. I performed to an audience of about 60 in a church. That was my prime.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of stuff were you doing?
Oh, all sorts. Mainly, this one lady or girl at the age that we were, she decided to call us Lizzie and the Walking Boys.
Sounds good.
And she did all the lyrics, and it was all her own stuff. So no one really knew what was to be expected when we were playing it. But yeah, they were nodding along.
Okay, great. Yeah.
You?
So, what kind of stuff?
What kind of music?
The band that I was in after university. So after university, I was in Liverpool, and I was in a band there. But I decided to come back to the Midlands, where I'm from, and live with my parents and stuff. You know, that thing where you've gone to university and then you come back to live with your parents.
It's something that British people do more than other countries, I've noticed.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And so I got into a band with some old mates of mine from that area, some of my old mates from college, and it was really great to be in a band with them again. And the music was sort of it's hard to explain, really. We had lots of samples, and so it was a combination of live band and backing track with samples and stuff. So it was kind of like funk, breakbeat kind of things.
Wow,
things like that.
Specific. Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite specific. So I can't explain it really, but dancey kind of poppy kind of stuff.
Yeah. That requires quite a bit of skill as a drummer.
Yeah, it's quite hard work. I was talking about this the other day on the podcast, actually, but it was quite hard work because in order to play along with the backing track, there's quite hard work, and some of those samples were not exactly in perfect time.
That's so what I had to says.
Yeah. It wasn't my fault. It was the backing track. Actually, once we did a gig once, and the sound guy who was doing the sound check for us, he was an American guy, and he kind of summed it up quite well. He was doing the sound test for us, and at the end of the sound test, he said, "You guys have got a kick-ass rhythm section, but you use a backing track." It was his summary, which kind of became my catchphrase in the band. You guys have got a kick-ass rhythm section, but you use a backing track. So it was quite hard for me as a drummer to play along with the backing track and keep it all in time perfectly. So we had to find different ways of doing it. So for a while, I had a click track in my earphones, right? So I had to try and drum along to the click track.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Why did you have a backing track if you've got you? Aren't you meant to be?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, I'm going to reference something else. So Ringo, who obviously you know, the drummer from the Beatles.
Wasn't he rubbish?
No, absolutely not.
Who am I thinking of? Who was the rubbish?
Someone else.
Rolling Stones? Did they have a rubbish drummer?
No, absolutely not. No, Charlie Watts is brilliant too. But no, it's a common misconception. People think that Ringo is rubbish, but it's absolutely not the case. He's great. But when they were recording one of their later songs for the anthology, if you remember, they came back in the 90s, the three of them, without John, of course. Yeah. They were being produced by Jeff Lynne, and Jeff Lynne was trying to use a click track. And Ringo got really angry. He was like, Jeff was like, I'm going to use a click track on this. And Ringo was like, I am the fucking click. That was that's his thing. So, yeah, exactly. The drummer should be the flipping click track. But no, my mate who was on keyboards had this idea that he wanted to incorporate samples and loops into it too, but also to have a real drummer in the band as well, which is great in theory, but in practice it's very hard to get right, especially on stage. It's okay in the studio maybe because you've got the right conditions, but on stage it's difficult. So click track in my headphones, that was hard because I couldn't hear the click because the rest of the band was too loud. Then the backing track in my headphones, same thing, couldn't hear the backing track even when we turned it up to the full volume. I still couldn't hear it over the sounds of my own drums and everything else. And the solution was to get a big speaker, a big monitor, and put it on a table next to the drum kit and blast the backing track right into my ears.
Would that not loop in? Would that not
Well, the audience is getting the backing track anyway. It's coming out through a speaker anyway, pointed at the audience. Yeah. But on stage, musicians often will have monitors. You see those little speakers at the front that sometimes the guitarist will put a leg on when he does his solo. He'll kind of put his foot on it. Those are monitors that play the sound back to the musicians. Or these days they have clever little headphones, little earphones and stuff. So yeah, that's normal. But it all just added to the mix of the cacophony that we were producing. Wow. But it was really hard to play in time to the backing track, and it also I worried that it was destroying my hearing. Having this really loud music, it became like white noise just blasting into my ears, and I had to try and drum along with that.
Yeah, what's the?
I'm not selling it. It doesn't sound wonderful.
Is it tinnitus?
Tinnitus, exactly. Yes, this is the word that came up in an episode. I don't. Actually, I think I'm all right. I think I don't have tinnitus, but but if I'd stayed in the band for a long time, I think it probably would have completely ruined my hearing. But that's the price you pay. That's the price you pay for being a rock and roll star, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you get the experience that you thought would be rock and roll through and through?
What are you getting at? What do you mean?
Well, just the lifestyle,
groupies, sex, drugs, rock and roll.
That, well, tattoos?
No tattoos. No, my body remains unadorned with ink. No. I managed to keep it all in check. I didn't sort of fully embrace the rock and roll lifestyle fully. Yeah.
Wow.
I saw some other people who did.
I'm sure you did.
This sounds like an intriguing story, doesn't it? So one other gig that I was doing in another band, we were being supported by this outrageous sort of I don't know, what were they, like heavy metal group. Okay. And they basically were doing the heavy metal thing, but to crowds of about 15 people. But they fully embraced the lifestyle of the full on heavy metal rock and roll band, including that, like, one of them had a groupie or a girlfriend. I don't know if she was a groupie or a girlfriend, I suppose. And I remember, like, I had to go backstage to get my snare drum because I'd left it under the counter backstage. And I went backstage, and exactly, the snare drum, listeners, viewers, is the drum that, one of the most important ones. The pang, the one that goes.
Exactly.
Is that the tang? Boom, tang, ba-doom, doom, tang. That one. That's the snare drum.
That one. There you go.
Yeah, so I had to go and get it, and it was like under a table. And I went in there, and the drummer from this other band was there, and his girlfriend was there too. And let's say she was on her knees at the time, if you know what I mean.
She was looking for his snare drum.
Well, let's say she was giving him sort of oral pleasure right there in the dressing room. Because they were a crazy rock and roll band.
Yeah.
And I was like, awkwardly, like, sorry, can I just get my snare drum? You know, I felt like saying, sorry, while you're down there, love, could you get my snare drum? But, so never fully experienced it firsthand, but
passively
saw some examples of that rock and roll stuff happening.
Yeah, good example. Very vivid imagination.
Maybe a bit too vivid.
Yeah. Well, I didn't expect this to be the start. I was thinking that we'll be talking about comedy today, but yeah, unless it was a very funny scene. I don't think that's the word to describe this lady's skill set.
It was pretty funny for me.
Okay.
I found it funny that they were having like this crazy rock and roll moment, and I was just awkwardly like, sorry to interrupt your rock and roll fantasy. Can I just get my snare drum?
And so did that ever fuel a joke that you did on stage as a comic? Because if you don't know, guys, Luke is a comedian as well. So he's a stand-up comic.
Yeah, if you it may not have been obvious that I make people laugh in my spare time. I don't know if that was obvious. Some of you are like, this is all very serious.
Exactly.
Yeah, I also do comedy. That's right. Yeah.
So when did you get into that?
Well, around the same time I started doing my podcast, actually. So it was sort of, nearly 12 years ago, about sort of 2009. A lot of things seem to happen in 2009 for some reason.
Big year for you. Yeah.
A big year for me. Yeah. So I started doing it then. How did I start? Is this the question?
I was going to start by saying a lot of people think that they get some laughs from friends, but I don't understand the transition between that and then thinking, this could be a profession. Like I think I could do this, because it's a big leap to go from just having a little laugh between your mates and then being on stage.
Yeah. Speaking personally, I've never felt like I was the funniest person among my friends. Like, I've always thought that most of my good friends are a lot funnier than me, and like some people I've known have just been so funny, and I've always thought, I'd love to be funny like them, but they were just funny just with friends and just like going through their lives just being funny people.
Yeah.
But then deciding to actually stand on stage and try and make other people laugh that you don't know. Yeah, it's a pretty weird thing to choose to do in a way. I think actually English teaching is probably part of the reason I decided to do it, because English teaching gave me the confidence to actually be able to stand up in front of other people and talk without feeling completely uncomfortable and nervous. When I first started English teaching, this is to groups of students in classrooms rather than like online sort of one-to-one lessons, but like, in front of a group. When I first started, I was very uncomfortable and very awkward in my skin and never felt relaxed. But it really helped me to gain confidence over time. I just became more and more relaxed and more comfortable being in front of a group of people. And I'm not saying that as a teacher I was always trying to make my students laugh, because you shouldn't really do that as a teacher, But sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's helpful to kind of lighten the moment or to keep people motivated. It can be useful to add bits of humour or touches of humour to a lesson. Yeah. And there were some moments when I thought, I'm getting better at making people laugh. And I thought, I'd like to try and do this. And I've always wanted to do comedy. I've always been interested in it. But I went to see stand-up comedians and thought, I'd love to be able to do that. I just don't know how to do it.
Oh, well, that's an interesting moment. You've looked at them and you've thought, I want to do that. Because that's for most people, they don't think that. I look at a comedian and I think, never. But that's amazing.
it's a bit like when I go and see live music. Like, part of me just can't enjoy it fully because I'm thinking I want to be on the stage. I want to be part of that. I don't want to be just enjoying it. I love it. It's amazing, but I don't know, for some reason part of me is just like I should be doing that or up there with those guys. You know, when can I have a go?
Yeah, when's it?
So I don't really understand where that comes from. Because I don't really want to be the centre of attention.
I was just going to ask that. Yeah, you don't seem to be too egocentric.
No, it's... I mean, some people probably become comedians because they do want to be the centre of attention. But I don't feel like when I'm with other people, I always want to be, you know, the one that everyone's listening to and the one that's making everyone laugh. I'm quite happy to just sort of like be a bit more shy, in fact, in social situations. But it's more just, I think that like making people laugh is amazing. It's so wonderful. And if you come up with funny ideas, you want to try them out. You want to see if they work.
Yeah.
And so the way I did it was actually, so I was seeing a girl at the time, and she thought I was funny. So I had been making these little videos, these stupid little comedy videos of various things. Okay. And I showed them to her, and she thought, oh, these are really good. You're funny. You should do this workshop that I know about.
Oh.
So there are these like stand-up comedy workshops that you can do. And so I joined this workshop. It's run by a comedian called Logan Murray, who is not one of the like well-known people you see on all the game shows and things, but he has worked with people like Richard Herring and who else? Greg Davies and who's the Welsh guy? Welshman always speaks like this, very gruff. The only Welsh accent I can do is Rod Gilbert. That's it, Rod Gilbert. You know him?
Yes.
Anyway, yes. He worked with him as well. He works with lots of comedians and helps them to write material and helps them, you know, with their comedy skills. And he runs these workshops called the Absolute Beginners Comedy Course or something like that. And so this girl was like, you should do this. And I was like, well, okay. I think maybe I just needed someone to give me that push. I wouldn't have had the initiative to do it myself. But because she told me to do it, I was like, yeah, all right, I will. And I did it. And it was like a series of weekend, like Saturdays. Most of the day, Saturday, you'd be in it was a room below a pub. It was below the Walkabout pub in Covent Garden in London. And there was a group of us that had all signed up to do it, other kind of misfits who had this desire to go up on stage in front of other people and try and make them laugh.
And what would you do in the workshops?
Well, at the beginning, it was extremely awkward. We were doing these really weird, like, improv games that I didn't understand.
Okay,
right?
So kind of like drama class.
Sort of. It was based around certain concepts which were really important to understand. Concepts about it's really hard to explain. I don't really understand it myself, but it's stuff like high and low status. So one of the games that we would do is that Logan would tell us to walk around the room, and you can either choose to be high status or low status, and it was as vague as that. Right, it was that vague, like, and we're all going, what's he talking about? What does he mean, high status or low status? And he said, just choose to be high status or low status and walk around the room. And when you meet another person, have an interaction, and during the interaction, change from being high status to being low status.
Wow.
And we're all like, all right, weird. So we all awkwardly sort of tried to be high status or low status. So what do you think? What would high status be if you were doing?
I'm imagining, class-based system. So upper class, lower class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people who choose to be high status sort of hold themselves high and sort of start to become rather posh and like that. And then the low status people are sort of like physically in a low status position, crouching, lots of subservient, hello master, that sort of thing.
Getting the hunchback.
Although people have
going.
A lot of hunchback sort of, I'm very low status. And then high status people tend to be a bit like this. And then you'd meet it's really ridiculous, but the idea is it gets you out of yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of sort of weird psychology relating to high and low status, but it's interesting to play with these roles, and also it helps you to sort of use your body and stuff like that, and breaks down your sense of awkwardness. So after doing that every weekend for a few weeks, you start to get less shy.
Yeah.
And that sense of like that, there's a voice in your head which says you shouldn't be doing this, you're making a fool of yourself, you know, people are going to think you look stupid. That voice in your head, eventually you're like, oh, shut up.
Yeah. It's
and then you just
down.
start
Yeah.
When you switch off the editor, as Logan puts it, switching off the editor allows you to suddenly, you're much more liberated after that, and then you can actually start to work on being funny. If you can just suddenly stop caring what people think of you, and stop second guessing yourself, stop editing yourself, then that's the first step you have to take to then actually free yourself up.
Yeah. Are there any comedians that you think like are perfect at this, or
oh God,
is it that, you know, any comedian that is on stage that we would both know about has gone through this and they are that already? Is everyone?
I think
like that?
any successful stand-up comedian, any comedian who goes up on stage and makes people laugh regularly has gone through that. Because in order to get to that stage, you need to get to that position. You need to do lots and lots and lots of gigs. You need to do loads and loads and loads of performances, and you need to fail many times.
Yeah, that is the scary bit. So, do you have lots of experience as a failing?
Well, yeah, of course, yeah. Almost every comedian does have lots of experience of, let's say, dying on their arse, which is the phrase that is used.
Yeah.
Loads, of course. Because you can't just, it's a bit like learning English, right? You can't just sort of like study grammar, study vocabulary on paper, or just study, and then one day, bing, now I'm ready, and then go out and suddenly speak perfectly and do everything perfectly. You're going to make mistakes, and you just have to learn to learn from those mistakes and sort of like just kind of grow into it. Same thing with comedy. So yes, I do.
So we go on to talk about the path a comedian might take trying to make it in the industry. And of course, we then get to experience one of Luke's gigs that flopped, meaning he got no laughs and an awkward silence. Americans are likely to also say they bombed, like, I bombed so badly on stage last night. So if you wanted to listen in to this conversation to hear how Luke bombed, then join us in part 2 and 3 of the episode, which is available on the website, thebritishenglishpodcast.com, where you can also enjoy part 1, 2 and 3 with the transcripts, the extended glossaries and flashcards as a premium podcast member, which I would like to add is incredibly affordable. And as I mentioned, this is a seasonal episode, meaning it is part of the Academy, where I have created exclusive explainer videos and audios diving deep into the usage of the native expressions being used in this episode. And then I've also made interactive quizzes, a pronunciation practice lesson of all the hard to say vocabulary in the show, and many more things that I will leave for you to find out about if you are interested. There's even a complimentary free sample lesson of this Academy for you to try. You'll get 60 expressions for free in that sample, and then you can see if it's something you think would benefit your English studies in the long term. But if you're not interested in that right now, then grab the free worksheet that includes a handful of lovely expressions from this part of the episode over on thebritishenglishpodcast.com. Anyway, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to not be too sincere, but it was really fun.
No, it was. It's. I think we can. Yeah. No, we can still be sincere. It was fun, and thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. I hope that I made sense and that I didn't ramble too much. I have a habit of rambling on, but It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think rambling suggests a negative kind of aspect to it, whereas I was rapt. I was very interested because you've got a lot of you've got the comedy, the rock and roll kind of lifestyle before that to lead into it. You got a lot, yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. So for anyone who hasn't heard of your podcast or what you do, can you just tell them where to find you?
So my podcast is called Luke's English Podcast. Luke, not Lux English Podcast, not Lux English Podcast, not Lux English Potcat, or Postcard. Luke's English Podcast, and you can find it on the internet, which I assume that you're aware of. And teacherluke.co.uk is my website. That's probably the best way to go, and you can find all the rest of it there. But the podcast is available in your normal podcasting app and on YouTube and stuff. Luke's English Podcast. Just Google it.
There we go. Thank you very much. All right. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Cheers.